Hello, welcome to This World. I'm Vikram Chandra, and it's the 24th of February, 2023. 1 year ago, on this very date, Russia began raining missiles on Ukraine. A war broke out, and the rest, as they say, is history. But this is a history each of us knows only too well. This war has affected each one of us, irrespective of where we live, what our nationality is, and which language we speak. This war has seen petrol and diesel prices soaring. In Europe, gas has become a luxury. In West Asia, countries like Egypt and Turkey have had to pay more for wheat. And why wouldn't they? Ukraine, after all, has been one of the world's major suppliers of wheat. And this war has set on fire one of the world's bread baskets. India, too, felt the pinch. High oil prices are always bad news for the Indian economy. And then there was that entire student crisis where medical students from India and around the world had to be hurriedly evacuated from Ukraine. The war riddled their education and their career plans with bullets. Many lost their jobs. Back in Ukraine, of course, it's been much worse. Hundreds and thousands of people have lost their lives, soldiers and civilians. So for the sake of all their families, the others in Ukraine, those suffering the brunt of the sanctions in Russia, and of course for the sake of the world, it's really important that this war in Ukraine comes to an end. But is it anywhere close to an end? We're going to be discussing this and a lot more on this special show on the anniversary of the Ukraine war. Also on the show, artificial intelligence is not only getting far, far smarter, there are also bizarre and somewhat scary aspects of it, which we're going to be talking to you about later on this program. All of these stories and a lot more in great detail. But first, let's take a look at what else is making headlines around this world.
China has declared victory over COVID-19 pandemic. The country's health authorities say the epidemic in China has, quote-unquote, basically ended, but it is not completely over. This comes after China recorded over 7 cases of the XBB.1.5 variant since the 8th of January. While addressing a news conference, Chinese health officials said that China's victory over the virus has set an example for other populous nations. Rockets were exchanged between Israel and the Gaza Strip following an Israeli raid on the West Bank city of Nablus that killed 11 Palestinians. The Israeli military said its air defense intercepted 5 rockets, while the 6th one fell in an uninhabited area. Israel responded by launching an attack on the Gaza Strip. At least 5 people were killed and 48 others went missing after a coal mine collapsed in China's Inner Mongolia region. The mine was operated by a firm named Xinjiang Coal Mining Company. Coal is a major source of energy in China, and its mines are among the world's deadliest, courtesy lax enforcement of safety standards. Wikipedia has accused Indian billionaire Gautam Adani of manipulating entries. The portal alleges that Adani spread disinformation on the platform and that 40 undeclared paid editors or sock puppets revised 9 articles as many as 18 times starting 2012. A 7.2 magnitude quake struck eastern Tajikistan on Thursday. The tremors were felt around 5:37 a.m. local time.
And that brings us to our top focus for this special edition of This World. Today marks 1 year of Ukraine's invasion. The war has been raging for a year now. And here's what was happening 1 year ago.
24th of February 2022. It's well past working hours.
The saddest moment.
But UN ambassadors in New York have been woken up for an emergency UNSC session. They've been tasked with de-escalating tensions between Ukraine and Russia and stopping a war from breaking out.
The day was full of rumors.
The council looks tense, and before they know it, everyone's phones are buzzing and videos are pouring in from Ukraine. There's been an attack, and a war has broken out. On the mic is Ukraine's ambassador, Sergei Kislitsia.
Because it's too late, my dear colleagues, to speak about de-escalation. Too late. So I call on every one of you to do everything possible to stop the war.
At the exact time as we are gathered in the council seeking peace, Putin delivered a message of war in total disdain for the responsibility of this council. This is a grave emergency.
As we sat in this chamber urging Russia to step back, President Putin announced special military operations on Ukrainian territory.
Ambassador, shall I do that right now, or you can confirm it?
On the president's chair is Russian ambassador. His Ukrainian counterpart dares him to stop the war.
Call Putin, call Lavrov to stop aggression. There is no purgatory for war criminals. They go straight to hell, Ambassador.
It is just a little over 9:30 a.m. in India, around 11 p.m. in Washington, and just about dawn in Europe, and the world is in shock. While tensions had been escalating between Ukraine and Russia for a while now, somehow the world had hoped it would not come to exchange of fire. But it did. Videos of airstrikes began circulating on social media, and of people being caught in those strikes. Soon, NATO calls an emergency meeting. It says Russia has shattered Europe's peace. Protests break out around the world. But in some parts, countries come out in support of Russia. Iran's foreign minister says the war in Ukraine is caused by NATO's provocative actions. Belarus says Ukraine invited the war.
Ukraine might have wanted this conflict. They did not do anything to prevent it. They were constantly escalating even after the recognition of these republics.
But the odd one out is Pakistan. Its then Prime Minister finds himself in the heart of Russia on the day of the attack. After arriving in Russia, Imran Khan calls the situation exciting.
Let's face it, the last 1 year has been a tragedy. Towns have been razed to the ground, food grains left to rot. Mothers have been forced to give birth in underground metro stations. Some 200,000 to 300,000 troops have died on both sides. And anything between 30,000 to 40,000 civilians have lost their lives inside Ukraine. Many people have been raped. Many have been assaulted. Many have faced severe torture. A year of this war has changed this world in more ways than we can think of. And the real tragedy is, it's not clear that this is going anywhere. Where exactly is the war headed right now? Let's turn our attention to that. At one point, remember, a year ago, the war looked like a no contest. After all, Russia is one of the most militarily powerful nations in the world. And that's the way it was looking on the ground soon after the invasion. Russia had taken control of almost 25% of Ukraine. Key cities had fallen. Russian forces were on the outskirts of Kiev itself. The likes of Kherson, Mariupol, Severodonetsk, all of that was in Russian possession. The Ukrainian counter-offensive that came later in the year changed all of that. The Ukrainians took back cities like Kharkiv, like Kherson. But even today, Russia controls 17% of Ukraine. It's now fighting for Bakhmut. And this roughly is where all the front lines are on the map of Ukraine. It seems to be a stalemate. Neither side is looking today as if it's clearly winning the war one way or the other. Kiev has asked its Western allies to speed up the supply of weapons. It's asked for fighter jets. It's already got tanks. All of this, it says, so that Ukraine can defend its territory and drive the Russians out. Now, that started to happen. In the last 1 year, several countries have sent weapons to Ukraine. Here's just a small list of some of them. Yeah, that's a long list, and there are some fairly advanced weapon systems inside that, and those weapon systems are getting more and more advanced with every passing week and every passing month. The West clearly signaling to Ukraine that we've got your back. So that's the sort of support that Ukraine is getting. But Russia, too, is both having its own military-industrial complex, and it's also buying weapons from elsewhere. It's bought weapons from Iran just recently. The West believes, and I quote, it's only a matter of time before China starts sending lethal aid to Russia. Now here's a question. Where is India in this war? Well, way out of the picture. India's stance has been fairly clear. It's chosen not to take a side. And India says, why should it? This war is not of India's making, and it's not India's to fight. So New Delhi has neither been siding with Ukraine nor with Russia. India says it is standing with peace, and it has time and again called for peace. Next question, and this is the big question, where is the war going from here? Now, just last week, there were whispers of a possible peace settlement, and they were triggered by this headline. Belarus's ruler and Russia's longtime friend, Alexander Lukashenko, inviting Biden for talks. Was he extending an olive branch on behalf of Putin? Some sincerely hoped so. Lukashenko, indeed, was perhaps playing the peace messenger. But that was until Biden himself visited Kiev in a dramatic, short and surprise visit. Biden then returned to Washington without making a stop at Belarus or calling on Lukashenko. Biden didn't even go close to talking peace. In that dramatic visit he made to Kiev, and that also after a 10-hour surprise train journey, this essentially is what he said. It was all about giving support to Ukraine, fanning the fire, some would say, sending more arms. Biden promised an additional $500 million worth of weaponry, including artillery, ammunition, anti-armor systems, air defense radars, plus, of course, he announced much tighter sanctions on Russia.
It was 1 year ago this week that we spoke on the telephone, Mr. President. It was very late at night in Washington, very early in the morning here in Kyiv. Russian planes were in the air and tanks were rolling across your border. You told me that you could hear the explosions in the background. I'll never forget that. And the world was about to change. I remember it vividly. Because I asked you next, what is there, Mr. President? What can I do for you? How can I be of help? And I don't know if you remember what you said to me, but you said, and I quote, gather the leaders of the world, ask them to support Ukraine. But Russia's aim was to wipe Ukraine off the map. Putin's war of conquest is failing. Russia's military has lost half its territory it once occupied. Young, talented Russians are fleeing by the tens of thousands, not wanting to come back to Russia. Not just fleeing from the military, fleeing from Russia itself, because they see no future in their country.
So Ukraine's clearly got Western support, it's got Western money, and it's got Western arms. But that perhaps may not be enough to secure peace, because let's face it, a large number of people are dying, and Ukraine could well be running out of people, could be well running out of fighting people at a certain stage. How many are the losses that Ukraine can take? And is it clear that Ukraine can actually beat Russia on the ground? From where I'm sitting, it's only looking as if the situation is going from bad to worse. There seems to be a stalemate there on the ground, and it's not looking clear as if either side can win. A day after Biden's Kiev visit, Putin came out and delivered his State of the Nation speech. This is what he said.
Особые слова жителям Донецкой и Луганской народных республик, Запорожской и Херсонской областей. Вы сами, дорогие друзья, вы сами определили свое будущее на референдумах. Сделали твердый выбор, несмотря на угрозы и террор неонацистов. В условиях, когда совсем рядом шли военные действия. Но не было и нет ничего сильнее вашей решимости быть с Россией, со своей Родиной. Мы уже начали и будем наращивать Хочу подчеркнуть, что это реакция зала в адрес жителей Донецкой, Луганской народных республик, Запорожья и Херсона. Еще раз низкий им всем поклон.
So as I said, the situation is only going south, and it's going south because neither side seems even remotely close to talking about a peace plan. Because if a peace plan is to be chalked out, what could it possibly entail? Somebody, possibly both sides, may have to compromise. Situation one, what Ukraine is saying, Russia should withdraw its troops completely, and now Ukraine is going beyond that. It's also saying that give back Crimea, make sure that there's no question of you're holding on to the eastern territories. Putin, by the way, maybe he has to pay for all that he has done. That's what Ukraine wants. Now, very difficult to see the Kremlin doing that voluntarily. And most analysts are not very clear that Ukraine has the military power to drive out the Russian troops, to defeat Russia on the battlefield and force Russia into accepting that. Ukraine, though, doesn't seem to have any doubts, and that's why Ukraine doesn't want to compromise. Zelensky has publicly said that his country will not only take the territories under Russian occupation back, it will also retake Crimea, which the Russians invaded in 2014. Such a move, analysts say, could potentially lead to a coup against Putin and ultimately to the end of the war. Of course, this would be a devastating defeat for Russia, and all of this, analysts say, could very easily lead to a coup against Putin and, of course, the end of the war, but the end of the war with a complete Russian defeat. Now, the problem with this entire scenario is that it is looking somewhat difficult on the ground. Why would Putin allow any of this to happen? Why would he allow his grip on power to erode? Isn't it more likely that he will keep on fighting, and it's also unlikely that Ukraine has enough military power to be able to force such a humiliating defeat on Russia? So what are the other possibilities? Situation two, Ukraine cedes some land to Russia. Crimea, perhaps some portions in the east. How likely is that to happen? Well, in September 2022, a Ukrainian pollster conducted a survey. This survey found that 87% of Ukrainians oppose any territorial concessions to Russia. Some experts believe neither of these options, therefore, is currently on the table. And that could mean that Ukraine becomes a prolonged war, a never-ending war. So where are we going to be finding ourselves on the 24th of February 2024? Will the war have come to an end? Or will it have become an even bigger whirlpool of fire, pulling in more countries? The West perhaps is ready for a situation just like that.
And that's how long we're going to be with you, Mr. President, for as long as it takes.
We'll do it.
Thank you.
And to talk about all of this and a lot more, I'm now going to be joined by three very special guests. Vladimir Omelyan joins us from Kiev. He's the former Minister for Infrastructure, and he is currently on the front line fighting Russian troops. But we're also going to be joined from the other side of the divide. Joining us from Moscow is Dmitry Babish, who's a Russian political analyst, and he's going to be joining us, as I said, from Moscow to give us the Russian point of view. Lieutenant Colonel Daniel L. Davis, retired, joins us from Virginia in the United States. He's a senior fellow and military expert for defense priorities. They're all going to be joining us. But I'd like to begin with you first, Vladimir Omelyan. As you can see, he's actually fighting. He's there next to the front line, talking to us from his vehicle there. So thank you so much for joining us from there and doing this interview. Now, obviously, today is the anniversary of the war, and it's not a particularly pleasant anniversary, 1 year since the war began in Ukraine. What can you tell us about the latest from there on the battlefield?
First of all, thank you, sir, for inviting to your show. I'm very proud and honored to be with you. Definitely, it's a brand new experience, sad experience for whole my country and all citizens. Definitely, it's a great challenge and great loss because we presume that we lost a lot of Ukrainians, civil and military ones. But on the other hand, it's a great chance for all of us to win this war, because we believe that the world should be ruled by democracies, by fair approach and by values, not by terrorists who decide in person what to do with the whole nations or with the world itself. And it's ridiculous that it's happening in 21st century, that you should compete not with your mind or initiative or innovations, but with weapons. But still, I hope that it will be the last war in 21st century, and the lesson will be learned by everybody that to fight somebody, to kill somebody, it's very wrong decision.
Okay, Mr. Alian, I'm just looking at your own example. You were the Minister for Infrastructure, you're a well-known politician, and yet there you are talking to us from the battleground. You're at the front line there in that particular vehicle. Is that common in what's happening in Ukraine? Are virtually all the people who can fight out there fighting on the front lines for Ukraine?
You know, it was a great challenge for every Ukrainian when the Great War started. What will come next? And we simply made our decision that we should all fight as one if we want to protect our country, if we want to preserve our independence and freedom. And this is what Russia didn't expect from us, because they thought that it will be a small regular army confronting them, it will be overcome very soon, and victory will be at the hands of Moscow. They failed, and we actually win. And I hope that 2023 will be the last year of collapse of Soviet Union, which we presumed to happen in 1991. But as we see of today, Putin wants to preserve the Soviet Empire and to make it larger. So for us, it was a common decision that we should fight for our independence, that freedom is not free.
But, you know, we've just heard what Vladimir Putin has said, and he's essentially said this is a proxy war. The West is fighting a proxy war with Russia, and Ukrainians are being used in this, and Ukrainian lives are being lost. The West are just pouring arms inside and funding Ukraine, but the lives that are being lost are Ukrainian lives. How would you respond to that sort of a statement from Vladimir Putin?
You know, Putin has nothing to say, and this is the biggest problem for him, because in his dream was to take Ukraine, to take all Ukrainian resources, people, and then to hit West with united army, using Ukraine as the biggest reserve for Russia. Right now, he can only say some nice words in his opinion or some new ideas, but he is not able to present any success. And this is the greatest challenge for Kremlin. 1 year has passed. They lost more than 150,000 people in the battlefield. Another 200,000-300,000 are wounded. They are out of the battlefield. And Russia presented very small, modest results. So we used to say in Ukraine that everything that Russia says, it was in the past. Russia has no future at all.
Okay, now, when you look at the path ahead, let's face it, Russia is still a militarily very powerful country. It's got nuclear weapons, and who knows if matters get really bad. You know, they could always threaten to use nuclear weapons or the likes. But in any case, the West is giving arms, and it's giving advanced arms. But do you think there is a real likelihood that you could actually win this war using military might, throw Russia out completely, impose a military defeat on them? Is it something that you really think is possible? And if it does happen, why do you think the Russians will not step up and use stronger methods, you know, use more air power, use nukes in the worst case situation?
You know, I think it would be not fair if, for example, China, having nuclear missiles, would say that tomorrow I occupy India.
Yeah.
Or another big state, Japan, for example, or United States, because I'm nuclear power. It will be never the case for Russia to use this argument that they can occupy any state because they are nuclear powered. I don't think that there is any kind of resolution for Russia except to withdraw its troops, to send Putin and existing elite of Kremlin to jail, and to pay reparations to Ukraine. even in Russia, there are a lot of voices about that since recently. Mr. Navalny, who was neglecting the idea of returning Crimea just a couple of months ago, day before yesterday, stated that, yes, we should come to the borders of 1991. We should withdraw our forces from Ukraine. So definitely Russia has lost the game. Right now, they're looking for some kind of escape. It doesn't matter how many tanks we get from West or how many jets we get from West. War is already lost by Kremlin. And everybody understands that because, as they call themselves, second army in the world showed very bad performance.
If I can just play devil's advocate out here, what you're saying is a maximalist position, if you will. Now, if Putin was to be hearing this and say, okay, so one solution is I'm going to end up being thrown into jail, why would he accept any of this, right? I give back Crimea, I give back the East, I get thrown into jail, there could be a coup, I could lose my position. Now, that's not necessarily a position that will be acceptable to him. And as a result of that, this war could drag on. If Ukraine is not in a position to militarily defeat Russia on the battlefield, and Russians are not going to be ready to just accept defeat, maybe at some point, don't you feel a compromise will have to be found, some sort of a path that both sides can accept and move away from?
Judging somebody is better to come from your historical view. I don't think that India would agree with Pakistan or maybe with China on some long disputed conflicts. And I don't think that any kind of compromise should be found. This is the same case for Ukraine. Russia invaded Ukraine, not Ukraine invaded Russia. Russia occupied our territory, and they did it just a year ago and killed a lot of Ukrainians, raped a lot of Ukrainians, took property from many thousands of Ukrainians, or even many hundreds of thousands. So I don't think that justice is about compromise, that, okay, let's say that from tomorrow, Putin withdraws its forces and he is a good guy, we trade with him. It's nothing that he killed so many people and simply ruined all international law system. Let's forget about that and start our page from the new start. It will never happen because it's a very bad sign for all other countries which decide that, okay, Russia was able to do that, so let's strike with our forces somewhere in Taiwan, in India, in Japan, or in Mexico.
All right, so you're saying there's not going to be any easy path forward. So do you then see this war continuing for a long, long time? And are the Ukrainian people ready to fight a prolonged war? What also are your expectations from the rest of the world, from the West in particular, that they'll keep on, of course, supporting and giving those weapons?
I think that war will be ended unexpectedly, as it happened in the 20th century during World War I, and actually as it happened in 1991. If you would have talked to people before the collapse of Soviet Union, just a few weeks before, nobody would say you that this is the end. They would say, oh, Soviet Union is a great power. It will last for centuries. Or Russian Empire in 1917. Everybody was expecting that World War I will take long time. Russia faces severe economical problems. Right now, they're desperately looking for new consumers of their oil and gas. So they might find somebody in China or in India, but it will not cover the expenses for the war. They lose too much money and too much human resources. They cannot recover from that. And I think that defeat of Russia will come from inside after the great failure on the battlefield, of course.
Right, so one more question for you. You were, of course, the Minister for Infrastructure till not that long back. We've, of course, been talking about the massive loss when it comes to livelihood, the number of people who've lost their lives, and a lot of other damage that has been done. As you also are driving around, what's the sort of economic damage that has been done to Ukraine, in addition to lives lost?
Unfortunately, yes. We have thousands of railways totally destroyed, 1,000 kilometers of railways, tens of thousands of highways destroyed, hundreds of bridges destroyed totally, and they cannot be rebuilt. They should be built from the scratch, unfortunately, and it will take a couple of decades for sure. I'm not talking about the generations to come, but a couple of decades are guaranteed to reconstruct and to build from the very beginning. But it's doable, because I hope that the result of this war will be Ukraine joining NATO and European Union. There will be no more gray zone in Europe, and there will be very clear border of the West and the East. And I hope that one day this border will be for cooperation, not for fights and wars. But it will happen only after the final collapse of Russian Federation.
All right, one final question. India, of course, is the president of G20 this year. What is the sort of message you would like to give to our viewers in India, to the government in India, to anybody watching this? What would your message be?
You know, in world, many people think that there are only two powers fighting between each other, United States and China. I believe that China has lost already because of supporting Russia. And India will be the second one power in the world. And fully respecting the heritage and history of your country, I would like to wish you only one thing: be smart, be strong. If you really cooperate, you will get much more than fighting somebody else.
All right, sir. Thank you so much for joining us. I know you're talking to us from right next to the front line, so do stay safe, and thank you for talking to us and for sharing that perspective with us. Let's now hear from the other side, as it were. Dmitry Babich now joining us from Moscow, Russian political analyst, been tracking affairs there for more than 25 years. Mr. Babich, as we hit the anniversary of the war in Ukraine, where do we go from here? Because it's not looking very clear to any of us that there is a solution, an insight, or a path forward. Where are we headed to?
Well, it was a tragic year, but it was not the first tragic year. In fact, what has been happening in Ukraine, it was a perpetual tragedy for the last 8 years, since the legally elected president was ousted violently out of power in February 2014. So we have two sad anniversaries this February. And unfortunately, things have not been stabilizing during all of this time. And what happened last year, I think it was an aggravation of the crisis that has been plaguing Ukraine and Russia for all of these years. And of course, if you want me to tell you the root cause of the conflict, I can tell you the ending of the Cold War was very strange. It was not the usual ending that we used to have with previous wars. Before the wars ended with a signed treaty, you know, both sides agreed that, okay, this is your territory, this is my territory, we sign a document, and the violence is over.
Mr. Babich, let's just set history aside for a minute. Now, at the end of the day, I know there's a history in it, and I know you'll say it's tough to set that aside, but the fact is that a year ago today, Russia did go into Ukraine, and that's the immediate reason why there's an armed conflict taking place there. I know you're going to say there were historical reasons for it and X, Y, that happened, but that's where the armed conflict is standing. I'm just wondering where that armed conflict is going to head to. Is there going to be a ceasefire at some point?
Well, the problem is that the armed conflict started in 2014, or to be more precise, in 2013, when the mob in Kiev, violently killing 38 policemen, ousted the legally elected president. Will you call it something non-violent, something that is not a war? No, the war started in Kiev when the Western powers were absolutely adamant in their decision to get rid of the president that they didn't like. And the whole problem with Yanukovych was that he used his right to postpone the signing of an agreement with the European Union. He had the full right to do it. And the West interpreted it as a crime and used its supporters in Ukraine, in Kiev, to start a violent, slow coup, which ousted Mr. Yanukovych out of power. Then there was an agreement between Yanukovych and the opposition signed on February 21st, 2014, which presupposed new elections in a few months. And the agreement was guaranteed by the foreign ministers of France, Germany, and Poland, and it was garbage. The new president of Ukraine, Mr. Poroshenko, said we couldn't find it. So this is the big lie of the West when they say the war started on February 22nd. No, the war started much earlier.
All right, Mr. Babic, given the fact that a year ago, Russia probably thought that Ukraine was not going to be here fighting for too long, and a year has passed, Russia has, if anything, given up a lot, some of the territory that it had got earlier, and the West and the US and others are giving Ukraine's arms, they're giving them advanced arms, armored vehicles, howitzers, all of those things are coming in. Do you really think Russia feels that it's going to be able to have a military victory in the Ukraine war?
Well, the problem is that the West left us no choice because Mr. Zelensky said that he planned, with the help of the West, to get Crimea back. You know what is Crimea? It's a peninsula with 2 million people of population, mostly ethnic Russians, but also Germans, Greeks, Bulgarians, but all of them people who associate themselves with Russia, not with Ukraine. Historically, since the 18th century, Crimea was a part of Russia. So if the problem with Mr. Zelensky is the non-realistic nature of his plans. I mean, the problem is not so much the juxtaposition of weapons, who has more weapons or who has more troops. Even if you have very good Western weapons, and even if you have a lot of troops, you should set yourself realistic military aims. You know, the aim to reconquer Crimea is unrealistic. Russia will not allow this to happen. And Russia will not use nuclear weapons. This is the calumny, spread by the West, that Russia ponders such a possibility. No, Russia has other powerful weapons with which it can stop Ukrainian offensive. But the best solution is not to try to reconquer Crimea in the first place. Let me remind you that actually there was a negotiated agreement almost reached between Russia and Ukraine in the end of March last year, and it looked like the war could end at that moment because Mr. Zelensky already started speaking about a neutral status for Ukraine, guarantees of security without NATO. And then the negotiations suddenly stopped in Istanbul. Obviously, Mr. Zelensky was under pressure from the West. And then we heard from Mr. Zelensky only the unrealistic things, such as Ukraine will join NATO, Ukraine will join European Union, we will reconquer Crimea, Russia must be defeated. So, the Russian people in Crimea and in Donbass, they don't want to live in Ukraine. They will not return to Ukraine. You cannot force them. And of course, Russia will protect them. So basically, the amount of weapons that the West is giving Ukraine, it's a waste of resources and also of human lives, because these weapons are going to kill a lot of people without achieving the aim that the West set itself.
All right, Mr. Babic, thank you so much for joining us for that. Now, what's the West stand in all of this? Let's try and get in a Western perspective as well. Okay, let's get a view from the United States now. We are going across to Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Davis joining us, Senior Fellow Military Expert for Defense Priorities. Thank you so much, Mr. Davis. We've been listening to the Ukrainian side and political analysts from Russia as well. There seem to be a lot of very entrenched positions out there. Ukraine saying we have to get everything back. We're going to kick the Russians out. They have to pay. The Russians saying that's not very realistic, is it? So not very clear where we head from here. It's been a year since the war broke out. Are we going to see this continuing year after year?
It's kind of shaping up that way, frankly, because I was a little disappointed just as a human being that at the 1 year mark you have both sides more entrenched than ever on fighting. There's no one really from any side even seems interested in discussing potential peace. And I think the reason for that is that right now that the Ukraine side believes that they can win the war. They believe that with enough support from the West over time, they can kick Russia out of everywhere. I think they actually believe that. And on the Russian side, they believe that there is no way at all that that's going to happen because they see their industrial capacity, their human resource capacity. They think they can win it. So both of them, you see the rhetoric is just really bad in all these speeches that have been made in the last 24 hours or so, is that, you know, it's demonizing the other side and saying that our side is going to succeed. And of course, in the middle, you have the Ukrainian people, and that means on both sides of the line of contact, and the troops who are dying in large numbers every day. And right. I just personally, from my military experience, and I've fought in large-scale armored combat before, I don't see any military path for Ukraine to win the war. And that includes all the stuff the West is sending, all the training that we're promising to give them. Basically, what I see is that it will extend the war and that it will increase the bloodshed. But I just believe that at the end of the day, and whether that's 6 months from now, 2 years from now, who can say, both sides, when they finally realize that they can't attain their objectives militarily, then they will start to entertain a diplomatic solution. And I believe that's where it's going to end up. And I'm just not sure how long it's going to take to get there.
So that sort of echoes what we've been hearing from some of the other experts. The Ukrainian side believing that it can kick the Russians out of Crimea or Donbass and going back to status quo ante all the way back to the 1990s. Russians saying that's not going to happen. They are not strong enough to do any of that. So actually, Russia may end up having an edge in this. Third possibility, of course, it being that there's just going to be a stalemate. The military battle will continue and continue. The Ukrainians are not going to be strong enough to militarily kick the Russians out. And who knows, the Russians could start gathering strength.
Well, it may be a stalemate, but it may also be that over time, just Russia's larger industrial capacity and human resource capacity. I mean, we got to understand, Russia has I think it's around 20, 25 million more military-age males from which to choose. And you see Ukraine has bled out whatever it is, 7, 8, 10 million people out of the country and many more displaced within. They just don't have as many people. So if Russia needed to mobilize another 500,000 this summer, for example, they could do that. Ukraine, I don't know that they have that many more people. I mean, they're already really having a hard time with the last round of 200,000. And you can just see that over time, it doesn't even matter how many weapons you send, how much ammunition. If you don't have trained personnel on the ground to use it, it's not going to help. And if Russia has more people and can afford to lose more over time, then eventually that military balance can shift in the direction of Moscow and Ukraine could potentially lose. But, you know, that'll come at a great cost.
So that's an interesting point you're making when it comes to staying the course. You're saying, all right, what's really kept the Ukraine in the battle so far is the fact that the Western countries have been sending in arms. We saw Joe Biden in that rather dramatic gesture going to Kiev and saying, we are here and we will be with you and we will continue to boost Ukrainian resolve. But you're saying that the real problem is going to be, where do the people come from? Where do the soldiers come from? The fighting forces come from? How many people can Ukraine afford to lose? Is that where you're saying that Russia could end up having an edge?
Well, I actually think it's a combination of both. And just look at what happened both from the last Normandy meeting as well as the last round of promises of Western weapons that have come in the past month or so. And you have a lot of Challenger 2 tanks, Leopard 2 tanks, M1 Abrams, M109 Paladins, Patriot air defense systems. I mean, lots of stuff. Bradley fighting vehicles. I mean, that looks like a pretty large group of vehicles. But what people aren't paying attention to is the fact that last October, Zaluzhny, the commander of the ground forces in Ukraine, said that he needed 300 new modern tanks, 500 to 700 more artillery pieces. He's gotten a fraction of that, and that's with now 4 more months of losses that he's had. So it's barely keeping pace with the losses so far. And even what's been promised won't come until just spread out over the year 2023 into 2024. So it's going to be a long time before they even get these weapons. And of course, every day that delays, they lose more stuff. So we're not actually giving them enough equipment, even if they had the personnel, to actually have a legitimate shot at forming an offensive capacity. But the longer it goes, the less it's going to be. And look, the fact is, the West just doesn't have it to give right now. It's not that they're withholding so much. It's that they don't have it themselves. I mean, the reason it's taken so long is because they have to refurbish and rebuild these things. They're in storage, but they're not capable of firing right now. They have to be brought up to standard. And then, of course, you have, is it the modern stuff or is it the older stuff? And the Leopard 1s, which apparently is going to be the majority of all these tanks that are coming, are barely any better than the T-64s or T-72s Ukraine already has. So it's not really an upgrade from that. I mean, we have to be honest with that. So when you see the combination of the human losses that are taken, especially the Donbass right now, and the drib and drab of getting new equipment, there's just not realistically, forget the emotion for the moment, but just realistically, there's not a military path for Ukraine to win. And it's going to be hard for him even to hold what they have.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. David, for joining us with that. And let's turn our attention now to artificial intelligence, or AI, which has been in everyone's mind space. Why? Because the dramatic progress that is happening in AI seems to be accelerating faster and faster every week, which is why it has been so dramatic. AI is improving and advancing so fast. So this is 2023 February. We already know that Bing Chat is probably much better than ChatGPT was in December. What's going to happen 1 year from now? What's going to happen 5 years from now? What's going to happen 10 years from now? Obviously, AI will become better and better and bigger and more dominant. The role it's going to play in our lives is going to become more and more important. And that will be both for the good, where we are going to be using AI to make dramatic transformations in our own lives. It could potentially be bad as well. And both of those aspects have to be kept in mind. But let's bring in our very special guest now to talk about some of these issues. Dan Fitzpatrick, who is the author of the AI Classroom. He's also the founder of AIeducator.io, one of the people who's really been using AI to teach people. And he believes that AI can work with humans. And if you learn to use things like ChatGPT, you will actually get very, very far. Dan, I don't know if you've really had a chance to play around too much with Bing Chat so far, or found Sydney, or done any of that, experienced any of that creepy stuff which has been happening.
I have. I've had a go of it and kind of compared it to Bing, and then what we know about Google's version as well that's coming, Bard. So yeah, I've had to play around with a few of them and using them and training teachers and businesses on how to utilize this technology.
Dan, when you look at some of the creepy stuff that has been therefore happening with Sydney and with Bing Chat in the last couple of weeks, how alarmed are you by all of that? Do you think this is just a big language, a large language model, and essentially autocomplete on steroids, and that's what's happening? There's nothing nothing particularly creepy there. It's not that there's some sentience there or something conscious or alive in any way. What is your own sense of what we've been seeing?
I think it's very early days with this technology, and just like I think I compare it with kind of the mid-90s of the internet. So when the internet first came and people were getting used to it in the mid-90s, there was lots of things that people were discovering about it, things that weren't ideal, but because the users were using it over a number of months and years, then the developers, the people who were creating this technology, got better at packaging it into a user-friendly experience. And I think that's what's happening here. We're in a bit of a paradox, because for this technology to get better, the public have to use it. So they're going to see it kind of warts and all the bad things about it as well as the good things, so that these companies can actually hone it and make it a usable product for the rest of the world.
I get, Dan, one of the big questions that everyone's been dealing with is that, this is something which could be improving itself very fast. And if you don't have guardrails around it and you don't have some security, a potential risk that people have been warning about for a long period of time, if this thing starts to teach itself and become really good at it, and it's connected to the internet and has other potential resources, you could get to a situation where it becomes way more intelligent than humans are, and therefore that's where it could pose a risk, an existential threat to humanity. Do you believe any of that is feasible?
Yeah, I know. I don't know about you, but when I play with it, I think it's already smarter than me. So I think we're probably already there to a certain extent. It's interesting because the old head of engineering at Google, Ray Kurzweil, he said that we'll reach a point called the singularity, probably in about the year 2045. Although I believe he's re-estimating that to be a bit sooner now because of this technology. And he said that's when we'll get to a point where the intelligence of AI will be vastly superior to pretty much every human on Earth. And I think when we get to that point, we have to know how to utilize it for good. And I think there's a certain amount of intention that has to come with this technology. So whereas in the past, technology gets released and we just go, right, well, let's see where it goes. And then governments act slowly to kind of safeguard people from them. I think we very quickly have to learn the lessons from the technological advancements of the last few decades, and governments need to get ahead of the game and start safeguarding this for the public. I think when it gets to that point, like you were saying, Vikram, about having such super intelligence, I think it's the benefits there will far outweigh the negatives. We're going to see this transform our society for the better.
Well, I'm sure you're experiencing lots of kids out there sort of saying, hey, this is wonderful. I never have to do homework ever again. ChatGPT is there to help me.
Yeah, it's going to change it. And I think for the better, the education system or the education systems around the world have largely avoided disruption for the last few hundred years. I mean, the internet came along, but actually, if you look at most schools allow the internet to a certain degree only to uphold the current way of doing things. This will disrupt it all, I think, because what the skills that we teach students, if an AI machine can do them, which employer is going to want that student to come and work for them eventually if they can get an AI machine to do it cheaper, more efficiently, with a lot more intelligence? So we're going to have to rethink what have humans got to bring to the table if this technology can do a lot of the things that we do in our jobs already. And I think a large, you hear this word a lot around AI at the minute, is empathy. AI can't, and it goes back to what we were just saying about understanding, and I suppose true empathy has to start with understanding. And if machines can't understand truly, then can they empathize? They might be able to give a guise of being able to empathize, but actually true empathy, I think, is a human skill. So how do we build the human skills out? I think that's where education has to look. Also, some of the things with education, we still need them. Literacy, in order to speak to these AI machines and utilize them and collaborate with them, we need to be able to phrase the question in a good way. We need to be able to have a dialogue with these machines. We need to be able to evaluate what's coming out of them. So I think the education system will have to shift. It will have to shift to more skills-based learning. And how to collaborate with AI. I think we're seeing across the world at the minute some schools getting scared, burying their heads in the sand. I think New York schools banned it. A lot of Australian schools are banning it at the moment. And I think all they're going to do is widen the digital gap. So COVID kind of showed up a huge digital gap across the world, didn't it, in terms of what students access the technology and students who don't have access. If schools actively ban this, they're just going to widen that gap for their students. Their students are going to leave their school and not have the relevant skills to live in this AI revolution, to live in and work in this new era. So schools have got a part to play here, and schools, instead of playing the victim, need to get active in this, need to go, right, you know what, this isn't just coming for education. Schools can get on board with this and revolutionize education in a positive way.
Well, I think one thing is absolutely clear, Dan, whoever you are, wherever you are, whether you believe in the scary aspects of AI or whether you're just saying, look, it's a tool that will help humans like other tools have done, I certainly agree with you that everyone needs to know about it, and certainly every kid needs to be educated in what AI can potentially do. Thank you so much for joining us, Dan. Thank you. And that's This World this week. We will see you again next week with a very special episode. My name is Vikram Chandra, and you're watching This World on WION. World is One.